The most holistic approach at conservation that aimed directly to conserve the paniscus species is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature Species Survival Commission. This chapter of IUCN is responsible for the Congo Basin Forest Partnership, which maintains 4 landscapes known to house bonobo societies, within the confines of which are the Salonga National Park, which was opened in 1970, and the Luo Scientific Reserve, which opened 20 years later in 1990. In 2006, 2 more reserves were taken on by Congo Basin Forest Partnership, and 2 more are currently under consideration. I felt it was important to acknowledge the efforts of indirect conservation due to the resulting impacts on wildlife. As aforementioned, it is improper human interactions that put bonobos and the majority of endangered wildlife in jeopardy. UNICEF has been a part of this indirect aid by offering health care, vaccinations, shelter, and nutritional aid to families of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Perhaps most importantly, UNICEF has been integral in strengthening education systems and disarming and counseling displaced and abused orphans that may have had a future in the bushmeat industry. The Congo Forest Foundation is a company and fund based in DRC that boosts local commerce in a small village via sustainable agricultural practices and the extraction and sale of latex. In 2010, over 3,000 villagers were employed, and the first store and local entertainment club was opened in Dima Village. In 2011, they updated their maternity ward. The foundation is still in the early process of development, collecting charity from Western societies for protection fencing and clean running water, though it shows major promise with an emphasis on sustainability at such an early phase. The most impressive means of biodiversity conservation that is indirect belongs to Working Villages International. This company offers a completely sustainable model after the research of a mere graduate student from the U.S. left him wise to the disadvantages of relying on Western aid. The Ruzizi Valley Project was the first of Working Villages International, with a mix of green roofing, composting, organic agriculture, and ox power. This valley went from starvation to sustainable, and from 20 employed to 600 by 2010, and 90 crop varieties. While I found these stories to be touching and innovative, I also believe that there is more work to be done in DRC. What all sources of aid tend to agree on is the continued research of the paniscus species to get a proper grasp of the endangerment situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The IUCN has its limits as a distributor of funds on where those funds can go. Efforts should be made, however, to include the sites of preservation currently up for consideration and to expand protection to Lamami, Laulaba, and Lumela Sankuru. Of course, it is my opinion that the remaining upheaval and human suffering that is prevalent in this area must be handled in addition to biodiversity conservation efforts to prevent the waste of these funds. The teaching of sustainable practices and aid in obtaining the proper health and social services is necessary in preventing further deforestation and the systematic deconstruction of the bushmeat trade. Education must go beyond sustainability, however. Offering a means to higher education and general betterment via distance learning or foreign education exchange could be a multicultural benefactor, as it has a tendency to be. Preservation of the paniscus species is a matter of habitat and biodiversity preservation and is holistic, requiring alternatives to commercial logging and illegal bushmeat trade. There are many sustainable materials and practices that have been utilized throughout the world and other places in Africa that have not yet reached the DRC. The major solutions that I propose in response to the pressing issues of deforestation for timber and the bushmeat trade are hemp and aquaponics. In this segment of my presentation, I will discuss practices from other parts of the world and other parts of Africa that show promise as well as efforts in the past that failed. This is also where I will expand on my proposed solutions. The Mentor Fellowship Program is based at the College of African Wildlife in Tanzania and caters to the conservative needs of 4 African countries. Unfortunately, none of these countries is the DRC, though it does show promise for conservation efforts in all of Africa. This program was organized by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Endangered Species Program in 2012. Its objectives include the training of wildlife veterinarians and biologists to aid the human and institutional capacity to conserve wildlife in Africa. This program is all-inclusive environmentally, with intent to help graduates and trainees manage climate change, bushmeat trade, impacts on extractive industries, and human-wildlife conflicts, as well as the management of disease in the wild. Perhaps the most beneficial aspect of the Mentor Fellowship Program centers on the public, legal, and political means to handle illegal bushmeat trade. I discovered 2 instances of aquaponics utilization in Africa in my research, though neither were in the DRC. The first is the Ma'abara Sustainable Agricultural Model, which is both low cost and low tech and uses kitchen scraps in a closed loop system. Ma'abara comes from the Niger Delta and means water farm in the native language of Ogoni. The second instance was very similar and still decently small scale. This was from the Africa Foundation. They had used the closed loop system chronicled in an open web PDF that used recycled barrels connected together with PVC piping and gave many helpful tips on species of fish and varieties of crops that will be cultivatable via the system they built. The model was constructed in rural Kenya. Africa Foundation. The Bushmeat Project is fighting to get conservation education taught in all schools in Africa to prevent the continuation and expansion of bushmeat trade. In many parts of Africa, they have succeeded providing free curricula, but many places, including the DRC, are limited on funding and materials currently that keep children from their education. Many current outreach programs that I was able to find stress self-reliance in the community, which is essential in ending the whole of the crises in the area. UNICEF and Planned Parenthood reach out in places all over Africa, including the DRC, providing proper health care and vaccinations when funding and supplies are available. But more funding is required, and STI testing and birth control are essential in conserving the biodiversity in DRC. Due to missionary work in these countries, this issue is often overlooked. But women deserve the choice to bear children and provide for the ones they have, the best that they can. What I enjoyed most in reading about the efforts of the aid of the organizations involved in this matter is that they all involve the Congolese in their conservation efforts. Hands-on training in this matter is incredibly practical and gives the Congolese the opportunity to pass on the skills that they learn in these programs to their friends and families. In matters of building within the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as gathering of materials for trade and profit, there are an array of sustainable resources that can be utilized in place of timber. For structural building and siding, rammed earth can be collected for the building site. This is also known as Pisa. For structural building and siding, that's what I just read. Straw bale is also used in structural building and is easily attainable and tradable in the DRC. Cellulose is made mostly of recycled newspapers and telephone books in the US, but can be constructed from hemp or a variety of other debris and scraps in the DRC for insulation. This is something else that may turn a profit locally. Due to climate and recent upheaval, most structures captured in field journals do not have enclosed doors and windows with frames, thus preventing a need for fiberglass. Wall sheathing can be made from thermoply, which is 100% recycled material such as cardboard and other paper products. This is another place where hemp would come into play. Now on to the aquaponics. Aquaponics is a symbiotic relationship between plant life, fish life, and microbial life. The fish live in the enclosed tank where fertilized water is siphoned to feed plants in floating beds. The plants utilize the nutrients in the water, cleaning it for the fish in a separate tank where it is siphoned back to the fish. Initial costs are minimal. Maintenance costs are little to nothing, depending on your breed of fish and what they can eat healthily. Fish feed is not a necessary item, as the Mahabharata was able to prove. They use kitchen scraps. Now, why is it so sustainable? Conducive to the demand for proper nutrition and water conservation, the cultivation time for most aquaponic systems are less than 50% of those conventional agricultural models. Required nutrients in that of an aquaponic system is about 25%, required land is less than 20%, and required water is less than 10%. Hemp seed is a source of dietary fiber and fatty acids and is not psychoactive. This provides an extra nutritious crop for agricultural processes in the DRC. Of all sources of biomass fuels, hemp is the most sustainable due to the source of cultivation time and chemical breakdown. This may be an eventual export for the DRC. Hemp is naturally resistant to more than 90% of known pests and can easily be grown organically, and is also known to suppress other weeds. Let's see. Hemp is also an excellent cover crop as it enriches the soil. Cover crops are necessary where there is intensive corn cultivation, like in the DRC and other places in Africa. Hemp is a versatile crop and could easily be utilized in green roofing productions for straw bales or timber for fiberboard. Hemp produces more pulp per acre than timber is capable of due to the high velocity of cultivation. The cellulose produced by hemp bark is better. It's a better insulator and a stronger fabric than cotton. The use of hemp pulp to make paper reduces wastewater contamination due to the lack of necessity for acids and bleaching. Finally, the oils and resins in hemp are capable of replacing most petrochemicals to produce biodegradable plastics and plant-based cellophanes. There are many potentials for research, development, and export in the hemp industry for the Democratic Republic of Congo, especially since the concept of utilizing this resource is so new. Paniscus is the last great ape species to be discovered, and we still have so much to learn. And due to upheaval and economic decline, populations in the only known habitat are in decline. Unfortunately, bonobos are also rare in captivity, and though they breed well, new captive projects are fragile. It is essential for the biodiversity of the Congo Basin and for the benefit of anthropological research that this species and its habitat be preserved. In order for this to be achieved realistically, it is an issue that must be faced holistically, incorporating all life in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Furthermore, the African people as a whole must be incorporated in the solution, as endangerment is a result of the civil war that spilled from the neighboring countries into the DRC. Finally, this is a global concern, as many countries contribute to the bushmeat trade directly and indirectly via the excessive use of timber and resulting deforestation of the African rainforest.